Hello, everyone. I think it's about time that I do a video talking about balance. Now, there are two sides to the whole what's balanced in Starfield equation. And so let's cover that first, and then we'll talk about how I went through the process of balancing DarkStar manufacturing and what it means for DarkStar, the upcoming verified creation. All right. So first of all, and I'm just showing my desktop screen because you know I don't have anything inside the game to show you this time around. Um, and I'm in the middle of talking with my hands. You can't see that, but just imagine, a fat bearded dude waving his hands around, and you'll get the image. All right. So basically, there's two sides to the balancing equation. There's gear, equipment, and how it upgrades over time, and that can be balanced to itself. And then there is how the equipment balances out against the NPCs available to fight, or the enemies available to fight in the world. I've said before in several videos and several live streams that Starfield effectively stops scaling up at level 75 ish. Um, you get some opponents that are level 98 at some of the higher end worlds. And some of the starborn in the final quest of the main quest, the final stage of the main quest, are hard set to level 100. But that's really it. And a lot of those enemies can be defeated at around level 35 if you're smart and have decent equipment. Um, but the equipment itself, um, you get weapons that stop at advanced, and you get weapons that stop at refined. None of the weapons in the game files have anything to do with superior quality. Only some of the spacesuits do. And, I wasn't at BGS. I don't know what their internal discussions were on balance and why they chose to make some things have superior and not, and some things have advanced and some not. But at the end of the day, what it left us players with, since we didn't have that information, it felt like gaps. And also, we always reach this point in the vanilla game with no mods that, on a powerful enough character, you will eventually end up realizing that the best weapon in the game is a particle beam weapon. It works against all of the foes, means you have to carry less gear around. That means you're less encumbered. That means you're more fluid and able to loot more and carry more and yada yada yada. You end up with, everybody was before mods became prevalent. Everybody was spitballing on different you know platforms like Reddit and Facebook, compared notes, and oh, what's the best spacesuit? Oh, what's the best weapon? There were people that were spreadsheeting the weapons to figure out which had the highest DPS against what targets, and all of that results in something that us old D&D players call min-maxing, or getting the maximum results from the minimum things. Or in the D&D terms, you would minimize some stats in order to trade those points to maximize other stats. Min-maxing. So at the end of the day, you're very well informed and capable player. Usually ended up just running around the world with a Varun Inflictor as their permanent weapon of choice. They would always hunt down a Varun Inflictor and try and get an advanced one that had some legendaries on it. And everybody was shooting to get instigating on their Varun Inflictor if they could possibly find one, get one to drop with instigating. And then, of course, if you were Starborn, you would hunt down the Starborn merchant in every new universe because they sold an instigating Varun Inflictor. So that was that was the end of the game, right? At that point, right? There was no reason to ever look for another weapon. It was better than most of the legendary inflictors you would find. It's absolutely ridiculous. And what the end result is that every other weapon in the game was devalued by the time that you got to high level. You had no reason to ever pick up a Grendel or a Maelstrom or a Kraken or a minigun unless you were, specifically using one for role play or flavor reasons. There was no reason to ever touch a weapon other than the Varun Inflictor. And if you were using one of those other weapons, you were probably very cognizant of the fact that you were using a weaker weapon for the sake of your role play or whatever. So the initial motivation behind DarkStar Manufacturing was, let's take the items that are in the game and continue their scaling algorithm, or at least a semblance of it, to higher levels. To make more weapons and more armor viable in the end game, and make everything relevant, with very little loss of power between the different weapons at your disposal, and also to just reward you for continued play. So I'll give some examples here. I've got a couple spreadsheets. So let's start with this one. This is actually the spreadsheet that I built way back in the day, a year ago, when I was pulling out the data from Xedit on how all of the weapons stats worked and how the damage scaling worked for all of them, and basically reverse engineering the way the game was calculating the damage that would show on your character sheet on the weapon that you were holding. So this here represents the damage scaling metrics used by the game to scale a weapon up before you do things like apply magazines and skill perks and weapon modifications like scopes and different receivers and anything having to do with legendaries. So this is just the raw weapon itself. And I'll scroll to the top here. So base game quality, one is just the raw weapon, two is calibrated, three is refined, and four is advanced. And then you have superior, unrivaled, and relic. Superior, unrivaled, and relic are added by DarkStar Manufacturing, and in a lot of cases, there are weapons that had to have advanced added, and some weapons didn't have any quality tiers at all. So, let's go down to an example I prepped out in the second spreadsheet, and that is the Varun Inflictor. At base, the raw weapon does 38 physical damage and 113 energy. And then the quality files, you'll have a quality 1, quality 2, quality 3, etc. that relates to these numbers. The quality 1 file does nothing to those. The quality 2 file adds 0.29 as a multiplier to the damage type. So it does 0.29 for energy and 0.29 for physical. So I broke these out into two different rows so that I could see in case there were any deviations between the particle beam weapons in the game on the damage scaling that was done to physical versus energy. It didn't seem, I don't recall any of them being the case, but I kept it this way just for consistency's sake. All right, so knowing that I went through the game files and I pulled out the exact metrics that were in use to create the rest of this scaling. So let's talk about what this scaling means. I'll go to the second spreadsheet. Here. All right, so this is all about the Varun Inflictor. I'm going to make it bigger for people to see easier. All right. So in the base game, when you have a calibrated weapon, it is getting a 0.29 damage increase applied. That is using the multiply and add mechanic. That multiply and add mechanic means that it takes the base value, multiplies that modifier, 0.29, and then adds the base value back to it. So it's basically an algorithm of A plus A times B. So if you had a base, effectively the 0.29 turns into 1.29. So you take any number like the 58, if your weapon did base damage of 58, multiply it by 1.29, and the result is the new damage when it's calibrated. Easy enough. Well, the base game does something wonky, and that is that an advanced Varun Inflictor, for example, is actually a sum of the calibrated, refined, and advanced. So The vanilla weapons get the calibrated quality file, the refined quality file, and the advanced quality file all applied simultaneously. The end result is that when it's doing its math, it combines 0.29, 0.34, 0.42 together and then multiplies that plus 1 times the weapon's damage. Confused yet? Well, DarkStar simplifies it because 029, 034, and 042, when totaled, equal 1.05. So you get 2.05 times the damage of the weapon is the resulting damage when it is advanced. That's how this all works. So that was my first goal, was figure out how the game was doing the individual files or the individual upgrades. And then I found out that it had a separate quality file for each quality tier. And then for each quality file, it does its own math or its own modifier towards the damage type, each damage type, to then scale the damage when it is that quality. And then I was like, well, that math doesn't line up because 0.42 from advanced doesn't equal what I'm seeing on the character or on the weapon file when I view it in game. And then I realized it was applied to all three of these because of the way it uses what they call a quality tiers any file. So it's combining all three of these to get the final result. The end result was 1.05 was actually the math being used. And it's 1.05 multiply and add. So effectively, it's just multiply times 2.05. So that was how it was getting the damage increases. And from there, I took the total gain portion. So I was like, all right, calibrated is 129% of the raw damage of a raw Varun Inflictor. Refined is 163%. Advanced is 205%. Okay, so you see how we're scaling up. And I looked at the gaps there, and I was like, okay, well, there's between 163 and 205, there's like a 42 point gap, 42 percentage gap. And then right here, there's like a 30 something percentage gap. So I continued that and went to a 50 something percentage gap, 51%. So it's like 39, 42, I don't know. But you see how I was taking these gaps and then tossing them in. I was like, all right, it's 10 levels higher. It keeps the scaling going in the same pattern. And if you look at the actual growth rate, you get 29% over the base, and then 217% over calibrated, 166% over refined for advanced, 148.9% over advanced for superior, etc. But this actually, that is not an overpowered algorithm at all. That is not. This is the superior weapon is probably exactly where Bethesda might have put it if they had added superior for the Varun Inflictor. That's what I was targeting. It may not be exact. I don't work for Bethesda, but that's what I was targeting. Where would Bethesda put the superior damage value of this weapon? So I calculated out where I thought that would be, and then I added the next two tiers. So Unrivaled, you can see it's a bigger jump. It's as big as the jump between advanced and refined from superior to unrivaled. However, it's also a 15 level gap instead of a 10 level gap. So that was the justification there. That was kind of how I dialed that in. And then Relic is 30 levels beyond unrivaled, and it has the smallest growth gap. It's a big number, but I didn't want it to go too huge. So you can kind of see how it was going in this algorithm. Now, to be fair, Unrivaled could probably be slightly less, and Relic could probably be slightly less. But at the end of the day, the pattern itself did lend itself to this, and anything less just didn't feel significant enough to warrant some of the upgrades on some of the weapons. The same math is used everywhere, but all of the weapons have different levels that different things unlock. So, for example, for the Varun Inflictor, Calibrated doesn't unlock until 55. Technically, the game doesn't put a level limit on acquiring a base level Varun Inflictor. Um, in my calculations, in DarkStar mods, I apply level 45 as a minimum, 10 levels below calibrated. I do that for all weapons, 10 levels below calibrated or level or no limit if it's, if that would result in a negative number. So it's one of the highest level requirement weapons in the game. It's like right up there with things like hard target and stuff like that. There's only a couple of weapons that go this high, where they cap out on advanced at level 75 plus. So already one of the more um, difficult weapons to attain an advanced version of. Very few worlds where this will drop. And then I kicked it up to Relic being level 130. So because it follows this pattern 10, 10, 10, 10, 15, 30. And I will eventually be adding a mythic here, which can't be crafted. It'll be drop only. That won't be in this initial release of DarkStar, but it will be in the next update. It's one of the features I'm putting on the shelf until after the initial release. But that will be 50 levels above Relic. So again, that's not going to be easy to acquire, right? That'll require a level 180 to start seeing them maybe drop. So there's that. But I wanted to show you this pattern of how I take a weapon and add those quality tiers and just make them continue scaling. This same thing was done, the same tactic was used on every weapon in the base game. Some of them, if we look at the level unlock tab, some of them cap out at level 90, some are at level 89, some are at 120, 115. I apologize if you hear my annoying dog barking in the background. He refuses to shut up today. Level 130, level 125 for the Pain Blade, right? So there is a chance that you can get your hands on a relic at a very low level. If you go to a high-end system or a higher-end system at lower levels and put yourself at risk, you could potentially get one to drop. There are some weapon racks in the game and weapon display cases that don't respect the level limits when they roll for gear. That's the fault of the vanilla game. That's not the fault of DarkStar. I added the quality tiers with their appropriate level requirements to the quality tiers any file. When a weapon is rolled as loot in the game takes the weapon and says apply the quality tiers any file. That tiers any file says, well, okay, let's look at the level of the person or the area that this is rolling for. Let's match it up with the highest level one. That's the one that applies, right? That's that flattened level quality levels that I was talking about in this tab. So it would, if you were rolling a Varun Inflictor for a level 75, then it would give you the advanced quality file, the DarkStar version of the advanced quality file with 1.05 as the modifier value. It's the same end result as these three being applied, but I simplify it so that you can edit the quality of the weapon. You can't modify the quality of the weapon safely when it's got three quality files on it. So you need, those are O mods or mods, weapon mods. So you need it to be a singular thing. That way it can be modified in the weapon bench, right? So it rolls a level 75 and says, okay, that's advanced, give you the 1.05 multiplier. But for some reason, there are some spots in the game where it just says, no, I'll give you the most powerful one. And it ignores level requirements entirely. DarkStar and DSM, for their respective weapons, they add stuff to the quality file. And the game has those weapons in different loot lists that are not manipulated by my mod. And those loot lists cause those weapons to show up where they're going to show up. I don't put my hand into that code at all. I don't edit those files. I don't tweak them. I didn't bother hunting them down. I just said, hey, Varun Inflictor can now spawn as a relic if it's level 130. So there you go. And then the game occasionally puts a relic weapon on Crete, for example, in some weapon case, and somebody will freak out. Oh my gosh, this mod is overpowered. Dude, I didn't put it there. The game put it there randomly based on some obscure RNG. I had nothing to do with that. Sorry. But there is that one gap. There's that other side of balancing that my mod by itself, DSM, did not address, and that is NPC level scaling. Now, there's a reason I never addressed that before. That is because in order to tell an NPC you should be 1.2 times the player level. So I'll do a new tab. Let's say you are level. We'll do a couple examples of player. Say this is the player column, right? And then this is a level 50 player. This is a level 75, a level 125, 150, 175, 200, 225, right? In the base game, NPC level 75, right? He's going to be 75 all the way down. That is just how that works. He is never going to go up. The bit that actor file for that NPC that it could be a Crimson Fleet or a Spacer or whatever. His file says I'm level 75. That's how the base game does it. Same thing if they are, base game NPC level 98, right? He's always going to be 98 in the vanilla game. Never going to be anything else. There is a chance that he may be told that it may tell the game when he's being spawned at a point of interest, hey, I'm a very hard creature. So it might multiply his level a little bit as it spawns him. But that's not the same as true scaling. So some other mods have done this scaling trick in the past. Let's say DarkStar, the new VC that's coming out soon. So instead of that NPC level 75, maybe he's actually level 1.0, right? Or 1.05. NPC scale 1.05. Because I think that is one that I actually. And then DarkStar NPC scale 1.13 for another one. All right, two good examples, two real examples from the mod. So this would be equals that times 1.05. So this is the level that these NPCs would be. Let's format these cells, and we'll tell them to just be a number with no decimal places, so it'll round it up. And this one equals that times 1.13. And we'll do the same thing here. And format and tell him to round them up. So the new DarkStar, these are the levels that those NPCs would be. Now, slight correction in this one row is, or technically there's a couple spots, but all of the NPCs, or most of the NPCs, should also have a minimum level. So he'll actually be 75. He'll actually be 98. And he'll actually be 98. So that's closer to how it'll actually play out. So the difference is that the base game doesn't keep going when you keep going. Now, why do you need to keep going? What's the benefit of keeping going? You can't max your actual skills and stats and perks unless you hit around level 320 to 340, depending on the scenario, and there's some other tricks and things like that. That means well over level 300. Under level 350, but over level 300. But nothing else in the game keeps going to level 300. Your new game plus stuff doesn't scale to 300. None of the NPCs scale to 300. None of the equipment you can wear scales to 300. None of the weapons scale to 300. None of the ship stuff scales to 300. None of it comes even close, actually. Most of it stops less than a third of the way there. But if you want to max out your character and get every possible thing unlocked for your character, you're basically playing an overpowered game for more than 2/3 of your playtime. Without mods. Without mods. With no new rewards other than that trying to grind for that new perk point and getting that one perk, which by then probably is just a point of pride for you because it doesn't give you any benefit. You're already so powerful, so high level that getting that last point of, meditation isn't really going to do anything for you. You left it till last because you didn't like it. You weren't going to use it, right? Or getting that last point of some melee skill and you never use melee, right? So the point being that's the state that Starfield starts in. And, I love the base game. I enjoy it. I played the hell out of it before I started creating mods for it. But all that said, there's a huge gaping hole once you pass level 75. There's no challenge past level 100, even at max difficulty settings that they provide you. So, as somebody who plays on extreme everything, and used to play on very hard everything, while it isn't critical that I have the DSM quality, armor and weapons, it sure makes the game more fun. The fact that enemies can pick up those weapons or spawn with those upgraded relic weapons and one-shot me and headshot me and ruin my day, that's great. Now, with DarkStar, add in the fact that they'll scale to your level or based off of your level. They could be higher level than you. And a tamer version of this level scaling applies to the ships as well. So you will run into higher level ships in space. So while the ship parts in DarkStar Astrodynamics were actually balanced the same way with spreadsheets off of the equipment already available in the game. The particle weapons, for example, were based off of an average of the PBO 300s, PBO 100s, and the Varun or Vanguard obliterators. I averaged the damage from those three weapons and put my weapons to start unlocking after those others stopped unlocking, and then made them just slightly better at the first tier, and they scale up over the course of a couple hundred, or tens of levels and multiple NG trips. So yeah, if you launch DarkStar Astrodynamics into your save when you're already level 200 plus and have been through 10 NGs, then you're going to have all the best stuff available day one. It's going to feel pretty powerful compared to what you had prior. You might then claim that it's overpowered, but you get none of that at level 1. You don't have access to any of that at level 50. You barely have access to anything at level 75. You don't really start getting access to strong equipment from DarkStar Astrodynamics until about level 110 and in G3. So, yeah, I disagree with the statements that that's not balanced or that it's overpowered, because you got to put in the time to earn it. And if you are a player that's already put in the time when you launch it, sure, it's going to feel strong because you've jumped from nothing to, oh my God, in an all of a sudden state. Play it from start to finish, from the beginning of a character all the way through, and go back every few levels and check the landing pads and see, do I even have access to this stuff yet? And you'll see. You'll go through every other weapon, every grav drive, every reactor, every engine in the game before you start touching DarkStar parts. When those stop giving you benefits, stop giving you upgrades, then DarkStar starts unlocking. That's the reality. But yet again, base combat didn't scale with the player. So once you get to a point to where DarkStar astrodynamics starts unlocking, the NPCs have already stopped upgrading. So that's where the imbalance is. Not that the weapons are imbalanced with the base game weapons. They follow a leveling curve, just like the DarkStar manufacturing stuff does. It follows a leveling curve off of what was already in the game. We were lacking proper enemy scaling, proper world and point of interest scaling, true challenges that scaled with the player, that made it necessary to have those upgrades. I didn't want to do that prior to this DarkStar mod because it requires editing every spawn file for every actor. So every version of a Crimson Fleet that can spawn has a file, actor file, that tells the game, here's my level, here are my stats, this is what XP you get for killing me, here are my spells, my skills, etc., etc., etc. You cannot script a modification to the levels of those NPCs. I spent a great deal of time trying to find a workaround to force a dynamic change to, say, a Crimson Fleet Marauders level when it spawned, so that I didn't have to touch their files. Because that's always my motivation. Find a way to do it with a script so that I don't have to do what we call in modding a hard edit. Hard edits cause conflict. Hard edits cause problems with other mods. Hard edits means your mod can get stepped on by another mod and overwritten by another mod. Do it through scripting, it's a lot more likely to just get along with everything. Take DarkStar Emissaries, for example. The version that's published right now makes no hard edits to any companion in the game. It doesn't touch a single companion file at all. It looks at companion files to get a reference point for the companion ID, so that when you say, make Sarah Morgan a Starborn, it knows which file is Sarah Morgan and says, find the Sarah Morgan ID in the game world and add these keywords to them dynamically. Give them this new gear dynamically. Give them these spells dynamically. Give them this weapon dynamically. Oh, look, now they're Starborn. Right? That's how that works. It does it all through scripting with no hard edits at all. So I tried my best, my damnedest, to find a way to do the power scaling, right? This thing here, this enemy power scaling, with combat style upgrades and level upgrades and everything. I tried my damnedest to find a way to do that dynamically. And the tools just don't allow us to do that yet. So I eventually, I started playing with the Royal Immersive Level Enemies mod. Played with that for a while. I was fine with it for a while, but then I just got more and more frustrated that A, it was a little more homogenous across worlds than I wanted it to be. And then B, it wasn't balancing inside my mod. It was something I could add on to get balance, but it wasn't balancing provided by my mod that provided you the upscaled weapons and the upscaled ship parts. So here we are. I've combined my two main mods into one. I've added new features. I've added new benefits and new perks and new tricks and new techniques and things that you can use, a lot of which I haven't even talked about yet. And to make it all more palatable to you balance hawks out there and to myself, I've added NPC level scaling to offset. So now you will be able to run into a point of interest at level 225 on Fermi 3, for example, and encounter a level 254 Crimson Fleet enemy who is elite and shooting you in the head with a triple legendary Mark III weapon. Mark III DarkStar enhanced weapon with an upgraded combat style. Enjoy. So with all of that massive mind dump, I bid you all a good day. This is just one more tidbit of what's coming at you with DarkStar.